Our next guest on the Hale podcast is Jason Norrish. Now, Jason is very well known amongst the Hale community, not only an old boy, he's the current first 18 coach and has been for the last decade, but in between that had a magnificent AFL career, played just shy of 150 games for both Fremantle and Melbourne, and has got a wealth of experience and a really fascinating story. So along with Chris Gard, we're just going to pick Jason's brain here and talk about his career and give a bit of advice to the boys listening at home. So, Gardy, I'll let you go for it. And Chuck, thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Chuck, you're obviously a Hale old boy, as Luke mentioned, and a boarder, in fact. Can you tell us a bit about the sports you played as a teenager, both in the community and when you're at Hale?
Okay, so I came to Hale when I was 15. So I'd come up from Bunbury as a boarder. And like most kids of my age, I played as many sports as I possibly could. So focused mostly on footy in the winter. In the summer, I played cricket, as well as basketball, play a bit of golf, a bit of tennis, but sort of anything I can get my hands on, I'd have a go at. But my two primary sports were probably footy and cricket, growing up in Bunbury, and then also when I started at Hale.
Obviously, house sport's been going for a long time at Hale, something that we love at the school. What are your memories of it? What house were you in, and sort of what did you play for your house?
Yeah, so we had, back when I was at school, we still had the 3 separate boarding houses in 3 separate buildings. So I was in Wilson House, and we had Lowton House and Faulkner. So we had a lot of sort of, I suppose, the boarding house grudge matches were always good fun and pretty hotly contested, as well as the ones with the day houses as they were at that stage. So we played, interestingly, we had footy, obviously, and cricket. We played, there was an inter-house rugby competition, a round robin competition over one afternoon. So I played rugby on that day, and let's get rid of Spewy on the other line. And we also had, when I was in the boarding house, we had inter-house shooting also, which was down on the down sort of towards where the tip is now. As you drive towards the boarding house on the right hand side, there was a shooting range down there. So once a year we'd go down and had it was just the boarding houses inter-house shooting. So I don't know how we could fire a gun across the school grounds, but we did, and so that was also good fun. So there was also an inter-house golf competition, which was a one afternoon event too, but most of them were the team sports.
Yeah, I might chip in, Gardy, here. One question, I'm sure our OHS managers listening to this and is thrilled that, that some boys would be like, let's bring back shooting. But on house footy, do you remember a time, and you can offer a no comment if you want, when you just saw a kid and you're like, I'm just going to clean you up and you're not going to see me coming, and you just absolutely just blindsided him to smithereens?
No, that's not my style, as you well know, Luke. I would just be making sure that everyone was involved and getting a kick and just playing fair and playing the ball. So no, I wouldn't be doing that sort of stuff. Even though there obviously was, with the boarding houses, weren't quite as there wasn't a lot of guys playing, so they really struggled to get 20 guys out on the park. So the last couple picked on the boarding house side were little year 9 kids, or guys who weren't very big, so you had to be a bit careful. So that would be classified as bullying. That would be part of the game. So no.
Tell us about a sporting match from your junior days that you still remember to this day, and what makes it so memorable for you.
It was probably the school football match where when I was in year 12 in 1989, Scotch had won the previous 3 Orco Cups and had been undefeated through up until the year that I was in year 12. So they won the 3 in a row, and we managed to knock them off at Hale, second last game of the year, which got us to be equal second behind Aquinas, who had one more game to go against Christchurch, and we played Wesley in the last round of the year. And we literally fell over the line to Wesley by a couple of points in a really close game, but we thought our season was gone, but then found out that Christchurch had rolled Aquinas in the last game of the season, which meant we all tied, Aquinas, Scotch and Hale tied to win the Orco Cup. So the game against Scotch the week before was sort of our grand final. We beat them, which meant they couldn't win outright. They had to bye in the last And it was sort of almost my last game of footy for Hale, so I had a fair bit of significance, and it was sort of culmination of a few years of first 18 footy, so that was probably my most memorable school game.
Yeah, nice way to go out.
Mm.
Prior to being drafted to Melbourne in '91, you played in the Waffle for Claremont and obviously won a premiership there. What did the grand final win with Claremont, sort of how does that rank amongst your all-time highlights?
Probably in hindsight, quite high. At the time, I was only young and inexperienced, I suppose, and I'd come from winning an Orco Cup in my last year at school. Then I went to Claremont and played league football my first year out, but ended up in the reserves, and we won a reserves grand final that year. And then the following year, we won the league grand final. So I thought I was going pretty well. And grand finals are just part of playing the game. And as it turned out, I went to Melbourne the following year and played in a reserves premiership at Melbourne, and then played finals at Melbourne in 1994. So, at that stage, I thought that the finals were just part of my football journey. But then the year after that, ended up at Fremantle in 1995, in the inaugural year, and didn't play a final after that. So I was sort of blessed with a lot of success early on, and like I said, probably didn't appreciate it. I was only young, and we had what we've classified nowadays as an older side. We had a lot of guys in their late 20s, and I was 18. So it didn't really sink in like I probably would have done if I'd been grinding for years and years and years and never having played in a premiership. So I took a bit for granted at the time, I think.
Yeah, and you made your debut for Melbourne in '93. Talk us through that sort of debut game and season in general. Like, how is it everything you sort of imagined it would be leading in?
It was a bit of the season itself didn't pan out the way I'd hoped. I sort of went over there expecting to sort of play early on in the season, and I had a few good games in the pre-season competition, and then didn't get picked in round one when some sort of senior players came back from injury. Then had some indifferent form for a couple of games mid-season, so I didn't debut until later in the year against St Kilda at Waverley, which was about round 15. So I played a couple of games in a row, thought I'd sort of got to the pinnacle of footy and it'll be all good. Then I got dropped, what I thought, out of the blue after playing 3 games, and then came back in a week later and then got dropped again and then came back in. So it's a bit of a mixed emotion type of introduction to football, but I didn't really. I loved being in Melbourne and playing in Melbourne, so I got to play at all those sort of community ovals that were sort of legendary that I'd seen on TV, Victoria Park and Princess Park and Windy Hill and all those sort of places that I'd seen, but never thought I'd ever get to play on. So it was good from that point, and living in Melbourne and playing footy in Melbourne. The mecca of AFL football was a really great way to get introduced to playing AFL football.
Mm. And obviously, like you mentioned, the Freo Dockers were introduced in '95, brought back to WA by your former Claremont coach, and then had a bit of a hampered first couple of seasons due to injuries. So, firstly, a couple of questions. How did you overcome those injury setbacks? What did you learn from them? And then the second part, how did it feel to be part of that inaugural Freo team and then go on to vice-captain the side between 99 and 2001?
So I came back and played in a preliminary final for Melbourne against the Eagles at the Wacker in '94, and then came back to Freo. I didn't have very good form at the start of the year. I was a bit complacent, I think, and then with a bit of indifferent form, and then training a bit too hard or not the right way caused injuries. They're mostly soft tissue injuries, so really should have been avoidable in hindsight. But when you're not in great form and you're really trying to hold your to the side, you probably train that your body would let you. And nowadays, I know that they're just not allowed to. Guys coming back from injuries, they don't come back as quickly as they used to. So you'd get a hamstring injury, and then you'd miss a week and play the following week and just hope you got through. And more often than not, but we didn't have medical facilities and the specialists to really give us the right advice. And we were really learning about, as you get older and become an adult, learning about how your body operates and what's good and bad and what works when, what doesn't. And I think just being to get back on the park really affected me. And in fact, those first couple of years where I didn't play many games and then getting osteitis pubis, I started a pre-season in 98, almost halfway through 97. So I got really, really fit without playing. And I think that fitness that I managed to build, that held me in good stead. And then I played every single game in 98 and went on to win the fairest and best because I was on the park and I was fit and healthy. And it was just that longer pre-season without having to play got me, I think, match fit or hardened to what was required.
Yeah. Now, joining us, in mid-conversation, Lawson, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Now, Lawson's one of our year 12 boarders. Where are you joining us from today, Lawson?
Joining from Wickham up north. So yeah.
Awesome. Now, Lawson's played first 18 the last, 2 and a bit years, a bit of year 10, bit of year 11, and obviously will be a key member this year. Now, Lawson, I'll throw to you. You can ask Chuck some questions now, mate.
Yep. G'day, Chuck. What was the best win that you were involved in throughout your AFL career?
I won a couple of finals when I was playing at Melbourne, which were awesome at the MCG. That was really great. And again, that was early in my career. So I think probably the first derby that we managed to win, because we lost the first 9 or certainly 3 or 4 seasons. We'd lose 2 a season, and not just lose, we're getting belted. So by the time we finally got across the line, which we were actually underdogs when we did, it was a great feeling, and not so much. It was good personally to win the game, but the impact it had on our supporters at that time and people in Fremantle in general, that was the really nice thing to see. The week after, I'd be walking down the street in Freo to get some lunch or something, and people would literally stop you on the street and say, you've made my year. It's been, the last 4 years have been a nightmare for me as a Freo supporter, and winning this game has just given me such a lift. So that was a really good part of it. So that's probably the best, most memorable win. The first Fremantle win when we finally won a game, which was against Fitzroy at Western Oval, and also, as I mentioned, the final stuff. Playing for Melbourne, winning finals was good fun as well.
Yeah. Next question then. What was the biggest crowd you played in front of?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it was something like 80,000 at the MCG in a final, which that was amazing because it was, the national anthem part of it was a bit I remember really well, where you sort of stand, obviously stand the line of the national anthem and everyone's quiet and then the crowd roars as the anthem finishes. That was really, it made the hair stand up on the back of your neck. But once the game itself starts, people probably don't believe this when other people mention it, but you don't really hear the crowd that much. In fact, at all. You hear the buzz of it and a roar or something. You don't hear individual people yelling at you or anything. I think that's actually stood out with the couple of games that have been played with no crowd, where you can actually hear the players. But no, the crowd did never really have a big impact on the game itself. And remember when we were going through losing patches at Freo, where we'd win home and lose away all the time. And that's the club psychologist would always say that the oval doesn't change shape, and no one's ever jumped over the fence from the crowd and kicked the ball. It shouldn't be any different, but somehow it was, but I'm not even quite sure why.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the feeling like between the Dockers and West Coast when you played? And do you still feel like that now?
It was the feeling to the individual or to the blokes I played against was always fine, and I'm mates with a lot of those guys now. But just the rivalry that sort of really started the very first game, where they'd come off a premiership, we were the new guys. I think we entered the first derby on the same win-loss ratio for the year. They were like 4-4 each or something, and they absolutely belted us and really, really beat us up physically. And we lost the game by 15 goals or something. It was just ridiculous. And that sort of started the rivalry. And then there was the Demolition Derby, which is well known. And that sort of was the line in the sand type of game. So I think just living in the same town as an opposition side and seeing them, things about them in the media, and they were very successful and we weren't. So I suppose there was a lot of jealousy from our point of view at that stage, that you get that deep-seated hatred towards a club, and that's started then and continues on today, to be honest.
Yeah. And then who's a player you most like to watch in today's AFL, and why?
It's a hard question because there's so many amazing players. I do like watching the midfielders because they're the position that I played a lot of. So the great players like Fife and Dangerfield, which everyone loves to watch. But I also do like watching guys who just play a position and play it well. And those type of players, I mean, if I could use a Fremantle example like Pearce, he's a spectacular player, but what he does, he plays his position really, really well. So he could probably play elsewhere, but what he plays in a specific position, holds his ground and does a really good job playing that. Like Shannon Hearn's exactly the same. Someone who just knows what he's supposed to do and does it week in, week out. And I think that's, if I put my coaching hat on, if you get reliability in your players, that's the best way to build a side. The difficult part of coaching is when you've got blokes who fluctuate so much in their form, even though their ability doesn't change. So I think, like I said, my coaching hat on, blokes who play their position and play it well regularly.
Yeah. And as you know, we talk a fair bit at Hale about what it takes to be a team player. I'm sure you would have coached a number of Hale footballers during your time with the first 18. Who would you consider to be fantastic team players? Can you name one specifically from your time at Hale who stands out, and one from your playing career, and why?
Yeah, I could name lots from Hale because it's, as you know, Lawson, it's an ethos that we have of team first. And because of that ethos, we've really developed over the years blokes who do play team first, and there's a lot of them now, which is great. That saying was probably first developed about 6 or 7 years ago when we had a guy by the name of Aidan Wilkins who was the captain, and he was a winning captain as it turned out, and he'd played as a year 11 and was pretty solid as a half-back flanker in year 11, but in year 12 he was given the captain's role. Not out of the blue, but certainly he didn't come across initially as a leader of men or a leader of boys, but he really developed into the role, and I think the responsibility given to him sort of defined him a little bit also as a player. So he realised he had a real responsibility to his team as the captain to make sure he set a really good example, and played in a way that everyone was inspired by what he'd done. And that really developed over almost the pre-season, the first few games of the year. Selfless the way he approached the game, and he was rewarded with an All-Pro Cup, being an All-Pro Cup winning captain. And there's a lot you can name. Even we've had guys who aren't, Wilco's gone on to play league football at Claremont and Ben had a reasonably solid career. And you could go back through well-known people like Tim House was another good example of someone who really struggled to get a game in the first 18. But when he did, he just did whatever it took to stay in the side. Yeah. And I don't know if that ended up being the basis for him going on to playing in the AFL system, but certainly he went for year 11 and year 12 not even getting close to playing a game, and he probably came in halfway through his year 12 year and ended up becoming an incredible player in a really short period of time. Yeah. The example he set while not playing was one that was remarkable. He would lift guys would be playing first 18 and we were doing a rehab session. He wasn't playing, but he was setting an example of how to do rehab even though he wasn't in the side. So he's a good one, I suppose. And as far as AFL players, because I played a fair bit as in a tagging role, it was really guys who realised, again, their position was a particular part of the ground to play, and minus the tag, it meant that I had to go and play on players and guys who would happily cover for you, and which is a hard thing because they've got their own game to play. But if you support wrong side of the player, or you got goal side, someone who would have their man and cover for you was giving away their position to cover for your position, and I always admired guys who did that. So people who would like that I play were probably Chris Bond, who was a captain of Freo when I was in there in 98. He was certainly a player like that who would just selflessly give to his teammates ahead of himself all the time.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I might chip in with one now, Chuck. Now you've coached first 18 for 10 years. What makes schoolboy sport special from your perspective?
I think it's the opportunity that the guys have got to play in a really amazing quality grade of football. And I think that as the years have gone, I've certainly noticed that the quality of the competition, the quality of the players has increased a lot. I certainly know that the way things are heading at the moment, with the drafting and having guys taken from school, then it's the guys who are playing school football now an amazing opportunity to get noticed, for one, and two, play in with their mates for a season, albeit this year's not quite the same, but play with a group of mates, play with a group of blokes, become really good mates, go out together on a footy field and get an understanding of what it takes to be a good team, and to do or sacrifice or be or show to improve yourself as a player, but it also improves you as a person. It earns you trust with other people. And I've certainly had boys over previous years, or parents of boys over previous years, who've thanked us as coaches for giving them the opportunity to play, because it gave them the confidence not only to play first 18 football, but gave them more confidence outside of football, in the classroom, with their mates, and it really helped them mature and develop as people.
Yeah, no, that's a good response to some gold there. Now, what separates, there's a lot of aspirational footballers at all PSA schools that want to reach the top. What separates, beyond talent, beyond the obvious thing, what separates those that do get a look in to the top level and those that don't?
Well, obviously, talent aside, it's the level of application, and it's easy to see level application, because it's not just it's everything outside of what they do at footy training. So, everyone can turn up to footy training with a pair of footy boots and make sure they've got the right gear on and train. But it's how well they train when they're training, and it's also how well they train when they're not at training. And you can tell guys who aren't eating the right things, who aren't doing extra things, extra sessions, they're not doing whatever it takes, extra over the person next to them, and that's fine. I've always said to the guys at Hale, that's up to you. It's your choice. You'll make as much out of your Hale football career as you want, and if your footy career for you is camaraderie, going to training, being amongst my mates and having fun, that's great. That's a perfect outcome. But then don't turn around and say, well, I wish I could have got drafted, or I wish I could have been playing for Claremont Colts, because they haven't done the extra bit that's required, whether it's going for a run in the morning, or getting extra sessions with the coaches, or going to the gym, or all those little things that you don't get marked on. There's not a score sheet saying I did 3 extra sessions this week, therefore I will be a better player. It's doing 3 quality sessions that you want to do because you want to become a better player. And I think all the guys that, pretty much all the guys who have come through have been drafted, have had that extra attitude to do extra things that over and above just turning up on a Thursday and Tuesday, Thursday and playing footy on Saturday. And that's just that's a personal desire thing. Not everyone's cut out to be drafted. Not everyone's cut out to play Waffle or Colts. And some guys, as I say to the players, first 18, it could be the pinnacle of your football career. So make the most of that aspect of it. So.
Yeah. Now, one of the, probably our most famous old boy, Tom Mitchell, you had the pleasure of coaching him in between his state duties. What was that like? What did he play like?
Well, Tom was a pretty quiet kid, but he just sort of epitomised all the things I've just mentioned before, where he turned up with an attitude that every session was going to be his best session, or certainly every session he was going to work on certain parts of his game, and he wasn't told to do that. He didn't speak to his dad, who had an outstanding AFL career, or his state coach, or whoever it was at the time, who said, go down to training and work on your opposite side kicking. He would just go do that. And a story I've told a lot of times to the players is he would turn up to footy training with his own drink bottle, because he didn't want to rely on other people to fill the bottle up for him and go thirsty. So he had his own drink bottle with him. And it was such a simple thing, but he just knew he'd thought about training beforehand. He'd prepared himself. He'd turn up. He'd have a drink bottle. He'd have something to eat before training. He'd go out and train hard. And he also wasn't afraid to speak to his teammates about their level of effort and what they were giving to the track. He didn't want to go and turn up footy training and have blokes just stuffing around and kicking it 5 metres away from him because that wasn't helping him personally. So very, very driven. The most driven player I've seen come through Hale by an absolute mile. And yeah, he had a good breeding, and he's probably had a fair bit of advice along the way on how to do things. But when he turned up to Hale, it was just him and the coaches. It wasn't as if there was someone else telling him what to do. So he just had that drive. And I'd see him down the gym in the mornings, outside of the school. Like, he was a gym in Florida that he used to go to. He'd be there all the time doing stuff. So he just had that extra level of desire.
Yeah. Now, last couple of questions, mate. There's a lot of boys probably listening at home that are footy heads. What would be your advice to them? They can really only do physical activity in ones or maximum twos. What do you expect of the first 18 players that other boys could mimic down the age groups?
Well, I would think that, as I'm just spending a lot of time talking about it, it's the desire to actually do it. So training on your own with a footy is one of the best ways to train, because you don't have to worry about going to fetch the ball from someone who kicked it a mile away from you. Kick it against the wall, throw it against the wall, rolling around on the ground, practicing picking it up. Is all stuff you can do. If you do it on your own, you're going to get 1,000 touches if you do 20 minutes of work. And I think that's why I say to the guys, just standing in and kicking the ball haphazardly to another guy 15 metres away, that's good for nothing. So I reckon this opportunity is an opportunity for the guys to work on those little skill bits. And what I'm looking forward to is when we do come back, seeing who has. Because to me, that's part of what we've been talking about, is the desire, it's the drive and the personal want to be better. We use the analogy, you can't just walk into a test at school and do it. You have to actually have done the study and the preliminary work to do well in it. You can't just turn up and expect it to gun it. It's the same when it comes to a game of football. You can't just turn up and expect that, doing 15 things wrong on game day, you just do it right. So I'd be looking at this from the guys' point of view of they'd be churning through footballs because they keep tearing the stitches out of them because they're kicking against the wall and rolling against the wall and doing stuff like that. Plus because everyone's pretty much housebound, there's so much opportunity. There's not a lot of other things to do other than go out and exercise and be better for it.
Yeah. Now, two more lighthearted questions to finish with, mate. When I took over this role, my predecessor Simon Young said, "Look, if Jason Norrish comments on your fashion, just ignore him because he doesn't have a lot of cred around the place around that." And the fact you're wearing a V-neck T-shirt that's designed for a 21-year-old at the moment probably backs that up. But on the Birkenstocks, now they're a thing which has got a bit of a following here in Perth. What are your views on them? Because the East Coast, it's not safe wearing them reputation-wise. But what are your views on Birkenstocks?
Oh, I'm a fan. I've got a couple of pairs. I know you're probably more a Crocs person yourself, but definitely Birkenstocks are a fashion statement. And again, that probably doesn't ring true with anything that you wear, but guys, I wear them proudly. And I'm absolutely a fan.
Now, this question, I know Lawson's a boarder, so I'm going to ask you the same question in a sec, Lawson. And Gardy worked at the boarding house for a while, but Tuesday at Hale's Pie Day, where all the boarders get a range of pies and the staff can get pies as well. Some of the stuff the boarders do with the pies, like they sometimes take the lid off, they eat it with a spoon, they eat the lid only, they put the sauce bottle actually physically into the pie. How does Jason Norrish eat a meat pie? I'm going to ask you, Lawson, in a second to describe the strangest thing you've seen a boarder or a boarder consume a meat pie.
I'm a bit normal. I just eat it by hand for a start, and I put sauce on top of it and just spread it around my fingers. So nothing too eccentric from me. But I did have a friend when I was growing up, speaking of stupid ways to do it or different ways to do it, he would do, as you said, take the top off it, eat all the meat out with a spoon or his finger or something. Then he would eat the top, and then he would pour his chopped milk inside the empty shell and drink his chopped milk out of the shell. So he's the only one person I've seen.
That is a disgrace. Lawson, how do you eat your meat pie?
I take the lid off, eat a little bit of the meat, but then I'll usually probably take it out, and then I just put sauce on the pastry on top and bottom and just eat that.
Like sauce on the bottom?
Yeah, I put sauce on the on the base as well. Well, not, yeah. Yeah.
This is your first and last guest appearance, Lawson. So you make most of it, mate. But no, Chuck, really appreciate it. You know, I know it's trying times for all of us, and hope you and the family and your daughters stay well and safe and healthy over the next couple of weeks, mate. And hopefully we can get the double blue back out there as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And to the guys who do get to watch this, I've sent a few email correspondence to the first 18 guys, but to footy people in general, man, it seems that everyone's pushing for the AFL season to start again in one way, shape or form. And I think we all hope that's the case, and certainly hope from a school perspective that we all get to play for Hale School football this year, like you said, in some way, shape or form. And I'm looking forward to that happening. So I hope it comes true.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for all that. Appreciate your time, Chuck, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Lawson. Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.